they set out a whole line of ground lights. These were all connected up to Ferris Lighthouse, where they could control it from. Also, into the ground were placed explosive charges, which on detonation would simulate the effect of bombs being dropped.
Just 4 days later, on June the 22nd, the stage and its parts were ready at the decoy harbour. At the real harbour, a fleet of newly arrived ships brought on a Luftwaffe onslaught. Maskelyne's magic was about to be put to the test. By order, all the lights in Alexandria were turned off, while in Mariut they were turned on. As the German planes approached, the decoy buildings and ships were blown up via remote control. It was all part of Maskelyne's plan to make the Germans believe they had got the right target, and that their flight leader had begun dropping bombs.
The German bombers are coming in a somewhat disorganized way. They're flying at night, which in those days was a very tricky business. The average German bomber will say, one of our people has already dropped their bombs, because he sees lights which look like Alexandria Harbor. He sees bombs going off. What are you going to think? Go for the bombs.
The Germans returned to bomb the fake harbour for 2 more nights. Maskelyne's deception had worked. The War Illusionist had found his new stage, and with the success, the magic gang was in business.
It seems utterly, simple and obvious, but nobody else had ever thought of it. He did it and it worked.
Maskelyne's success proved that decoy installations could be used on a far greater scale than had ever been imagined. The principles of light, shadow and dummy structures were used to shelter other British naval bases. Maskelyne's work at Mariut earned him a promotion to major, and something else that had eluded him, the respect of his superiors.
He was basically one of a kind. There was nobody else, in the history of World War II that did camouflage quite the way he did.
The army wanted to see what else Jasper Maskelyne could do. They gave him an even greater challenge, the Suez Canal. The Germans regularly attacked the narrow canal, trying to sink British ships there and make it impassable. The Suez Canal was an important link in the British supply chain. Without this 107-mile-long lifeline between the Mediterranean and Red Seas, British ships on the way to Egypt would be forced to take a huge detour, thousands of miles around Africa's southern coast.
It's those 3 things, Alexandria, Cairo, and the Suez Canal, that Rommel wanted desperately, and Winston Churchill desperately wanted to keep. In fact, he issued an order that we will defend those 3 places to the last man and the last bullet.
When bullets did not work, the army turned to Maskelyne. He was ordered to somehow extend the range of the 90 searchlights placed at anti-aircraft batteries along the waterway, thus making it easier for British gunners to spot the enemy planes. But Maskelyne had a better idea.
Instead of using the searchlights, which were normally used simply to assist the anti-aircraft guns, he basically used the searchlights to blind the pilots. Now, it wasn't just enough to, shine a light in their eyes because they can jink around and they can get out of the searchlight. No, what he did was he turned the searchlights into strobe lights.
Then you would send this dazzling set of beams spinning in the air. In fact, they called it a whirling spray.
Maskelyne planned to hide the Suez Canal in an ocean of light.
The basis for it, which in fact had first been seen on the stage of Maskelyne's theatre in London in 1885, with a technique known as black art, in which a series of lamps facing the audience so that objects behind it are less easily perceived.
Though the secret behind the whirling spray remains classified, photographs show it as an array of reflective glass attached to the searchlight. As it rotated, the mirrors brought havoc, to what was once a single shaft of light.
I think I may say, without particular vanity, that the Maskelynes know as much about the deceptive use of mirrors as anyone in the world.
But would it work to save the Suez Canal from German attack? Autumn 1941. Jasper Maskelyne and his magic gang were practicing magic's black art. They made a device that turned standard army-issue searchlights into something much more spectacular and dangerous. They boasted that this magic mirror attachment could protect the Suez Canal from German air attack. Now it was time to prove it. Maskelyne decided that only he could put his device to the test. He climbed into an RAF fighter and rose 15,000 feet over the African desert.
And when they neared the canal, the people on the ground, his Confederates on the ground, turned on the spotlight. And it caused such a dazzling effect that it blinded temporarily the pilot, and they lost cohesion, and they plunged toward Earth, and only in the last 400 yards did they manage to pull up to keep from crashing.
The near-death experience convinced Maskelyne and the army that the device was ready for deployment. 21 searchlights with whirling sprays were set up along the canal. Enemy aircraft failed to penetrate the curtain of light.
Many a Heinkel and Messerschmitt spun down into the earth when hit by that flickering blaze of light.
After the Magic Gang's 2 big successes, there was no shortage of assignments. Their next big job came from the Commander-in-Chief in the Middle East, General Wavell. He wanted to deploy a large number of tanks near Alexandria, but Rommel's land and air spotters were a problem. Could the gang make his tanks invisible to the desert fox?
The desert is a particularly difficult place for camouflage deception because it's flat as a billiard table, generally speaking. It's featureless. There's nothing to block the view. And both sides, most of the time, we're in plain view of each other.
Maskelyne had to somehow make a tank look like a truck, not only from the air but also from close up on the ground. The camouflage equipment had to be lightweight, easy to set up, and inexpensive to produce. The Magic Gang set to work, hammering and sawing at their headquarters. Within hours, the gang had designed a device they called a sun shield.
It was in fact 2 frameworks that fitted over a tank from front to back and that split down the center and effectively converted the tank into an innocent-looking lorry or truck. And this could be controlled from the turret of the tank beneath by pulling a lever. The 2 sides fell down and the tank rolled out, just effectively a metamorphosis like a butterfly coming out of the cocoon.
Maskelyne's sun shield created the illusion of a truck, but he realized it would also be necessary to rub out the tank's tracks in the sand. So a spiky chainmail device was attached behind each tank to make its tracks appear to be those of a big truck. Maskelyne positioned the camouflage tank in plain view side by side with several trucks. Neither the officers on the ground nor the pilots circling overhead could spot the tank. Within a few days, General Wavell concentrated what looked like a mass of harmless transport outside Alexandria, opposite an Italian weak point, but it was really a tank strike force. The tanks smashed right through the Italian front line, stopping an enemy offensive into Cairo before it began. Hearing the news, Maskelyne was rightfully jubilant, but not just over Wavell's success.
I danced with joy. War magic was coming into fashion at last. And now I knew that this was only the first small beginning of what we could do.
June the 21st, 1942. Britain's grip on Egypt was slipping away as Rommel and his Africa Corps captured the port city of Tobruk. Rommel, now a field marshal, pushed the British 8th Army back to El Alamein, 60 miles west of Alexandria. As part of a desperate rearguard action, Maskelyne's gang was ordered to create ambushes to confuse and trap the enemy. They prepared an unlikely trap.
Lumps of camel dung or any other dung you can think of, donkeys or horses, to put on roads in parts of German-occupied territories. They were constructed of explosive. So a truck would see a lump of dung go bang, and that was the end of one truck.
The ruse, while successful, was far from being the grand illusion that Maskelyne had yearned for since arriving in North Africa, the one that would make the difference between victory and defeat in the desert. That assignment came from British General Bernard Montgomery. He had a plan to beat the Desert Fox on the sandy plains of El Alamein. Montgomery's Operation Lightfoot had to succeed against all the odds.
The British could not afford to lose. And they were the ones who were attacking. They had to get the Germans out of there. They needed a victory for morale purposes. They could not afford to lose their oil. I mean, it could change the outcome of the war, literally. The Germans, for the same reason, it was their only shot to get the oil. The Battle of El Alamein was a decisive battle because it was all or nothing for both sides.
Montgomery decided to launch his attack on El Alamein from the north, where the supply lines were located. But the general's strategy had a twist.
He knew the only way he could win was to make the Germans think that he was going to attack someplace else. So the trick was, how do we fool the Germans into thinking the attack is going to come in the south? And that was Maskelyne's job, and that's what his camouflage was all about.
Maskelyne's grand illusion had to outwit the Desert Fox. In September, with only 1 month before the launch of Operation Lightfoot, he and the gang worked like never before. They knew that the Battle of El Alamein would settle the fate of North Africa.
I think the size and scale of the battle really gave Jasper the stage that he really wanted to have. His heart was singing, but I'm sure he was scared to death.